Zondo further reiterated the need for the NPA to be resourced by any means necessary in order for it to be able to do its work. Well, we speak now to former National Prosecuting Authority head, Advocate Menzi Simelane. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Simelane.
Good afternoon,
Thanks very much for your time. Just your thoughts on that clip we played of the former Chief Justice.
Oh, well, I'll start with the easiest bit, which is that the NPA needs to be resourced by any means necessary. I can agree with that. That's absolutely correct. Not only in terms of the numbers of prosecutors that should attend to cases, but the level of the ongoing training that they need to undergo. I believe that a lot of that should be done. I don't think there's enough of that being done for a variety of reasons, but I think it's important to start looking into that as well.
Would those be the only issues for you, resourcing and training?
Well, look, last time we did a count on the cases that the prosecutors look at generally based on the dockets that are there. It's about 1 million a year. I don't know if the number is increased or gone down, but on average it's that, because that's just how easy it is to open a police case and getting the police to do the investigations. And out of those cases, over 300,000 or so, a third would actually go into trial. So 600,000 wouldn't end up in trial because 300,000 would be struck off the roll, or at least 300,000 would be removed from the roll. So with those figures, what it indicated is that there's a lot of work that usually still needs to be done on any one case. So the time that it takes and the resources that it takes to get a case to be ready to call the first witness, a lot of work needs to go into that. So some thought must go into the resourcing. It gets worse these days because of the specialized nature of the work that needs to be done on various things. Corruption cases, for example, are criminal cases, but it's a specific type of crime, the corruption that is there. There's no violence generally involved, but it's a lot of paperwork that needs analysis. And usually it's a type of crime that's done by professionals, whether it's lawyers, accountants, and all of those types of people. So you need like-minded resources to fight like with like. The more difficult one, I think, is the one, the first bit of the clip. I think the former Chief Justice has a disadvantage in that he wouldn't have all the facts that pertained to why that decision was taken. I think he has a disadvantage there because if he had the information, he would recall that we had a Khampepe commission, judicial commission led by Justice Khampepe at the time, that looked into the difficulties that pertained then when the DSO was there between them and the police. And we spent a lot of time. I think it's a 158-page report. And what that report indicated were serious difficulties. They're not there now. And the essence of it was that because of the intelligence capacity that the DSO had, there was a clash between the traditional police intelligence and their intelligence and where everybody got the information from. In fact, one of the serious allegations about the DSO was that they were infiltrated by foreign intelligence. And as a result of that, there then had to be a mechanism to respond to that threat, which was a threat to national security. So if Justice Zondo had an opportunity to read that report, he would have understood why there was then a need to revisit the scheme. It's just coincidental that other factors also got into play, leading to the total disbandment. But the essence was, yeah. And
we'll go back to that, I mean, in a minute. But isn't the central argument that the former Chief Justice is making that we had a unit that became a pocket of excellence? It got something, it did something right, as a result of which it was feared by criminals and South Africans approved. And to have killed that, even if it means that with the context you've just provided now, yeah, that perhaps the baby was thrown out with the bathwater, but in essence, it's something that ought to have been kept and allowed to do what it had started doing. Would you differ with that?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily differ. I'd say yes and no. Well, when they were disbanded, we actually came with an option that was going to retain a large chunk of it. The first bill that we drafted, because we were asked to draft it, I was one of the people that looked into it. Another gentleman was Leiso Jafta, and Flip Jacobs was head of legal in the police, or one of the legal people in the police. The first bill that we produced was such that the DPCI that would be created would report directly to the Minister of Police. In other words, the head of the DPCI, what we proposed then was that that head must report to the Minister of Police and be at the same level as the National Commissioner. So effectively, we'll have two institutions, right? That was the first proposal that we put as a way of dealing with the issue, so that would have avoided the need to completely disband structurally the DSO. You take everybody as they were, call them the DPCI, and then have them report directly to the minister. The debates that then took place with that was not generally opposed, but it then got in the way of a discussion about a single police service, to say, what do we mean when we talk about a single police service when you're then going to have those two? And those obviously who are elected and have a mandate to run the country concluded that it wouldn't work very well. So let's remove the direct reporting to the Minister of the Police and have the head of the DPCI under the reporting directly under the commissioner at an appropriate level. Obviously, it's a DDG position. So that's how we basically ended up. Does it mean that the DPCI is not effective? With respect, I differ there, because the reasons for effectiveness or lack thereof, in my experience, has very little to do with the structure. It's got to do with the personnel and how the personnel is managed and how it's treated.
Let me ask you to hold your thoughts. I mean, right there.
Yeah.
Right? And just take you on the two issues that you've raised. In other words, how the Kampepe inquiry and how that report then influenced what subsequently happened.
Yes.
Right. Number one, and then number two, the formation of the Hawks itself, and the argument that was, that led to the formation, what led to the formation of the Hawks in ways that you had not, or not in the way that you had originally envisaged in your first drafts of the law. Just taking those two alone, do you honestly believe that the people who agitated, for the disbandment of the Scorpions in the first place would have settled for anything less than what was articulated at that ANC conference, because it was abundantly clear to all and sundry that all that was wanted by the powerful people at the time was a disbandment of the Scorpions, who were going with this Hollywood-style arrests and who were threatening those who obviously wanted to commit crime.
Yeah. Well, they were going to settle for pretty much anything. I actually was in that commission.
In other words, it was like, by all means necessary, close this thing down.
No, it actually was not by all means necessary. There was a discussion. I was in that commission that discussed, deliberated on that issue, the Peace and Stability Commission at the conference. And we were asked specifically if we thought the situation could still be salvaged. And we had argued strongly that there's no need to disband the Scorpions, because the people that were problematic, or identified as problematic, were known. You could simply cut them off and keep the rest. The problem was the systemic nature of the problems that Justice Kampepe had identified, in that they were very deep, and the threat to national security became the overriding factor. That if you do have intelligence operatives operating in the country, and with the cooperation of one of the units in the country, then you are beginning to chatter into basically dangerous waters. And that the only way to do it was to remove them and see if you can recreate them differently. But you couldn't fix as you go, as it were, because the infiltration, it was alleged, at least then, had gone that far. So the NIA, the State Security Agents, it was near at the time, had done enough work to identify those particular problems, which were going beyond, in any event, what organized crime and law enforcement was about, but beginning to operate in the political scenario. So because of that, the end result was that, look, let disband and then start afresh and reassemble what we can reassemble.
But realistically, though, I hear what you're saying, and you are the head of the NPA, and you are a lawyer. but as someone who dabbles a lot in politics,
Yeah.
I remember how the tide had turned politically
Yeah.
at the time. In other words, there was this very powerful group within the ANC, and that won the day, you know, and they were basically in charge. They would have gone to stop it. They were going to stop at nothing. And remember, you know the history of this country as, I mean, better than I do, I would dare say, because you would be privy to information that I wouldn't. Yeah. Some of the things I conclude on them on the basis of what is available, whereas you and other people would be privy to information that is not in the in public. But we know for a fact, which continues to be the case even to this day, depending on who's in power, who's powerful at any particular point in time, that even within the intelligence community, there were problems there. So in other words, you had to take whatever was presented with a pinch of salt.
Correct. You're absolutely correct. Everything that was presented was taken with a pinch of salt from different sides. Politics did play a big factor. If you remember, the issue leading to Polokwane was even less about the Scorpions. It was other political decisions that were either being taken or not being taken. So the Scorpions debate was also then caught in those discussions. And everything that one group was of the view was linked to another group then was seen in a particular way. So I suspect that those political considerations that were there at the time pertaining to the political situation of that particular conference did contribute as well to the fact that the Scorpions had to go. So I agree with you, they did play a factor.
Now, with the benefit of hindsight and what you may know now, do you think it was the right decision?
I don't think it was a bad decision. I think it was a good decision to establish the Hawks. I think for me, what I can criticize in the Hawks is the insistence that the head must not report to the Minister of Police. My view is that that should be revisited so that you give the Hawks sometimes institutional cooperation, as I call it. Cooperation and competition is very important, right? So a Hawks or a unit or a structure that is freed of the traditional ways would do, in my view, a different job, a better job. Because if you remember, the scheme of the DSO was that we are taking people not the traditional way. In fact, there's a joke when I went to one of the police officers one day, senior people in the police, I said, look, I want to join the police. Can they take me? The first thing he said was, no problem, DG. The first thing we'll do is send you to Hammanskraal. And I complained. I said, why would you send me to Hammanskraal? Because I can go to a training range and learn how to shoot. He said, well, you've got to go run around the field and we need to see if you breathe properly. So the traditional ways around policing are inherently the biggest problem we have in the country, and we haven't dealt with that. The advantage of the DSO, if you remember how the former Chief Bulelani Ngcuka dealt with it, is that they recruited people out of university. There was a big hula baloo about the recruitment of completely different mindsets, completely different people. You train them afresh. There's a huge advantage to that compared to...
And look what they did.
Well, look what they did in the sense that, one, we are able to train people differently the first time. So they don't learn the ways and traditions of an established institution.
Isn't that good?
It's a very good thing. We agree with that, which is what we wanted to do again with the Hawks. To say with the Hawks, you bring a fresh group of people, but they report differently. In fact, at the end, when the Hawks were established, a large number of the former DSO people went to the Hawks. General Sibiya is one of them. He was head of the Hawks head of the DSO in the Free State. He went back to the police as a colonel. A couple of hundred went, others went to the SIU. So that is a good thing. So we shouldn't run away from the fact that structure doesn't necessarily always determine excellence and success. It's management tools, management ways, and training that make those determinations, because the things that people get concerned about are caused by people mostly who are aggrieved and whose grievance are not given the attention that they deserve.
Now, I want to go where I stopped you, which is your view about the Hawks, right, and what your views are as things stand currently. But what I wanted to sort of coming through like a bit systematically. I want to now to place you at especially after you mentioned Bulelani Ngcuka. You now, I think it was 2009, correct? December 2009.
Yeah.
You get appointed
Yeah.
as the head of the NPA. Yeah. And critics of your tenure say, and of course, subsequent to that, of Sean Abrams, is that this is where the wheels really came off. Yeah. Notwithstanding the challenges of training, of resourcing, and everything that you mentioned. That's where problems started for the NPA.
They call it
deeper and wider ways than perhaps would have been the case before.
Right.
Or prior to that.
Well, firstly, it depends who's saying it. I'm very keen to find out who's saying that. I think the word that is used is hollowing out.
Yeah.
I've heard Menzi Winner talk about it, and different other politicians talk about it. They say there's a hollowing out, you know. A hollowing out is a systemic way of removal of people. It would be very interesting if they can give you names of the people that were hollowed out of the system. Well, my tenure was short, right? And I'll give you...
Here's one. I'm sure, I hope we can get a clip of the DA spokesperson on these matters. Breitenbach we had yesterday, and she spoke about a personal case. Let's take a listen to what she had to say yesterday when she spoke to us.
Advocate Chaka has a long history. He was the regional head of the Johannesburg Specialized Commercial Crime Unit many years ago. He resigned with 24 hours notice when the Brett Kebble thing hit the news because of his connections there. And then he was brought back by Menzi Simelane under Jacob Zuma to do a job. And the job wasn't to be a good director of public prosecutions, this we all know. And he's done that job. He's done well. And he's one of the elements in the National Prosecuting Authority who have constantly undermined the National Director and made her job of restructuring the NPA immeasurably more difficult.
Oh, talk to that. Oh, well, that's very interesting. There's two things that she talks about there. Well, she talks about Chauke specifically, and then she talks about the appointment by President Zuma.
And how later then you got to bring him back. But we'll get a bit into that, because that's what happened this week.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing to recall is this. When I got there as a deputy first in November, December, then appointed as NTPP, I think around Feb, right? The issue there is that the HR of which is the personnel section of the NPA, falls under the Director General. It's a head of department, governed by Public Service Act and the Public Service Regulations. So when I got there, he was already on suspension, and basically, you know, all that concerned me was that all prosecutors are at work. So when you get the normal reports that, look, these are the number of people on suspension, dismissed, going disciplinary, and all of the kind of thing, he was one of those that was on suspension. And the question was, so when are the disciplinary processes starting? And nobody had a clue when they're going to start, how long it was going to be. Then the question was, is this situation compliant with the public service regulations? Because there are time frames within which certain disciplinary action must be taken if somebody is suspended. I think it's actually 60 days. And that time frame had passed. So the question was, if time frame has passed and nobody is disciplining anybody, HR comply with the public service regulations. So HR said, well, we're going to have to bring him back because that's the situation. And I agreed with it. I said, well, that's the right thing to do. When you're ready to charge him, you let me know. He was not a DPP at the time. He was a prosecutor, right? So that's how we came back. And when I left the NPA, he was not DPP. He was still one of the senior prosecutors. So I can't talk about the period after he was appointed DPP. But that was the scenario as far as that is concerned. I mean, the appointment is a totally different thing. I think Ms. Breitenbach would have to give specifics to say, well, this was your job, as she calls it, that President Zuma gave everybody a job. She must indicate what that job is. And there was no such job, and the facts don't support that. In fact, on the contrary, if you look at the facts and the work that we did, it was work that struggled to deal with. And I'll give you one case. When I got the crime intelligence, there was a problem about a head of crime intelligence at the time, where monies from the fund, the secret fund, were unaccounted for. So that all talks about something needing to be done and those kind of things. And actually nothing was done. Then on the side comes the Vosloorus case. I get told about the Vosloorus case by somebody that Ms. Breitenbach and others never mention. The acting DPP, a lady in Gauteng, who says, NDPP, we've got this matter because we've got this old lady who keeps complaining about this case. This case is old, it's over 10 years. We don't know what to do with it. So I ask about it and they tell me that, no, it's a case like this, like this. So I said, no, fine, go for it. And then the process started to say, if you go for it, these will be the implications. I said, that's fine. I'll account politically for the implications. That's how we start the process of the arrest of the individual concerned, which was put together. In fact, the lead prosecutor in that matter is somebody in public office now that I don't have authority to name, but it's a common person that can be known. We started that process, and then I agreed that if the Joburg office is now ready with a prosecutable matter, because it was a murder, assault, GBH, kidnapping, we looked at all of that. We had a problem with the murder part for a variety of reasons. So I said to them, let's stick with the kidnapping and the assault, GBH, because the two witnesses we needed were there. I asked that they give me assurances that those witnesses were willing to testify. And fortunately, it was the mother and the sister of the deceased. And they said they are willing to die to get this thing done. So with the two of them, I then agreed that if they are ready and they want to prosecute, I'll back them. And when the decision was taken that they are going to prosecute, I then took the responsibility to inform the relevant political principals of what was coming. And we did that, and the rest is history. There was an arrest, and the person started going to court. Obviously, was convicted after I'd left, but we started that process, which others, including Ms. Breitenbach, had long struggled to do. I suppose that's why they struggle to talk about it, because it doesn't credit them.
So you're saying that, because I mean, you saw this week, he has been placed, Andrew Chauke, Advocate Andrew Chauke has been placed on leave by the president pending the outcome of a process that's going to look into whether he's fit to hold that office. So
Correct. You
are categorically denying that you were responsible for unleashing him on South Africa, given what people are now saying is his apparent failures as the South Gauteng head of the NPA. Some people holding him responsible for, in fact, blocking investigations into many people accused of wrongdoing.
Naturally, I do. But this is what I would say. It's the same thing that Lieutenant General Mkonazi also indicated. My point is this. If, as it is alleged, Advocate Chauke blocked things, somebody picked that up, that this is an instance of blocking, why didn't they do anything about it? Because if he's blocking something, I'm really not speaking for him, I'm just talking about how the system ordinarily ought to work, because I also dealt with exactly the same kind of issues. What I would do if the police would say to me, there's a difficulty with a decision coming out of a particular court, I would simply say, which prosecutor is that? And I would get in touch with the DPP to say, please speak to that prosecutor. There's a hold up there. The instruction of the docket on the docket is not coming through, or an arrest warrant, as expected by the police, is not coming out. Figure out what the problem is. So you can go to the location and find out what the problem is. So why didn't they have him arrested for defeating those that know better? Why did it have to take this long for that to happen?
What do you think it did? Because it took almost 2 years for the president to act on the requisition to suspend him.
I think the president was entitled to also think about it this way, to say, you are asking me to do something very, very, very serious, but all of you down there, the police, the intelligence, the NPA, you all have the power to go and pick up a problem if there's a problem. So if he needed more than enough time to actually have a look at this thing and assess its impact properly, it was important. But if indeed there was an obstruction, because this is what it would be, assuming that the accusation against Advocate Chauke is not that he's part of the organized crime. Let's say he's just partly incompetent or partly unsure, which is something that's there in the NPA in some cases. How could he have been assisted to make a decision? He had NDPPs. Why didn't they assist him to make the decision? if there was a blockage. You simply call him. You sit with him and you say, what is the issue? What difficulty do you have here? And they would have given whatever explanation he gives. And what somebody senior to him ought then to have done as a supervisor is to give a prosecutor an assurance that, no, that's fine. Make a call as best as you can make it. If I disagree with it, I'll get a second opinion. If I disagree with that, I'll then prevail one way or the other and convince everybody else to basically outnumber the problem. That's how I dealt with it. If there was a prosecutor that was difficult, I get more prosecutors to say, look at the same thing, give a view, and purely on the numbers, the one loses. Then the decision goes with where the majority is, because it means if the other one doesn't want to prosecute, you excuse, and you get somebody else to get on board and prosecute. It's not a difficult issue at all. Why was it not done? Those who are accused at least must explain why they would not have done it. So I feel bad for Advocate Chauke in one way, because he's being scapegoated by other people who ought to have done their work and didn't do their work. But in parts, if it is true, then obviously there's a problem that must be explained. But it won't be difficult because it's in the dockets.
If you were to be called to that inquiry set up by the president to look at everything that has happened, including, of course, triggered, one should say, by the allegations that Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi made, you wouldn't be found to have had a hand in not only hollowing out the National Prosecuting Authority or doing the bidding of the powerful and mighty at the time when you were the NDPP, but no one will find you to have assisted in any way in either blocking or protecting those who may have done wrongs, including, but I can't get into the details now, Busasa matters and all the like. Sitting there right now, you have a clean conscience that you were never involved in any such activities.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be more, in fact, there's quite a lot of information that one could share about how the system worked, and more names would probably not outshare more names if I have the authorization to do so. But by and large, there wouldn't be a problem. I'm pretty comfortable about all the cases involving the Busasa case. I think it's the Lindam T case, for example, that the SIU was dealing with. And I'll be very quick about it. All that happened in that case, that the investigations were not completed. And by the time the DSO was disbanded. And all we did was, because the NPA didn't have investigative capacity, all that was required was that all the files needed to be transferred to the Hawks. And arranged with Anwar Dramat that please receive the vehicles, please receive all of these dockets that are still outstanding and prosecute them. That's with the Bosasa matter that everybody's referring to. And then they had to start with an investigation. When they wanted to suggest charges, I objected to charges being suggested at that point in time, simply because the investigation was not complete. And it was not complete because one of the persons...
Not because you took it upon yourself or someone asked you to.
No, let me tell you. In the media, it had been reported about different participants and the beneficiaries. I think Commissioner at the time, Lindam T, was mentioned to have done something. But also there was the CFO who had received a call for something to that effect. When a charge was suggested and I was listening, he was excluded. So I said, why are you excluding? There's this individual that was mentioned was a CFO. Why is this one not part of the docket? And the response was that we are trying to make him a 204 witness. So I refused. I said, there's going to be no 204 as far as I'm concerned. This is one matter where everybody that's alleged to have done anything wrong is available. So I don't want a 204. If you're going to proceed with it when you are ready, I expect to see all of them. It's your call still, but I will not support any prosecution without the CFO. Obviously, the matter went to be investigated, and lo and behold, a couple of months later, when the indictment came out, the CFO was there. And I said, there you go. And that's part of the problem that was there, in that the selective nature of how decisions get taken, unless some people are vigorous in understanding why certain choices are made, you're then always going to be running into problems of how those decisions get made. And at the end of the day, you end up getting matters withdrawn because the consideration wasn't vigorous enough at the beginning. That's the biggest part that is lacking in the NPA, that at least by now ought to have been better, but unfortunately it's not. It needs to be attended to.
You're familiar with the Open Secrets report. You're familiar with the work Dalla Omar Institute at the University of Western Cape have said, where they said they've crunched numbers, they've looked at timelines, they've looked at what each key player did
right.
over the years, and they came out saying the NPA and the Hawks
right.
have actually failed this nation when it came to, notwithstanding the faults and flaws of the state capture inquiry.
Yeah, not on their own. I think there's a lot of politicking around these institutions. It's traditional, it's always been there, and it's probably not going to go away anytime soon. And it's easy to happen because of the way we do socialize. But it's also largely about the way we comment about the institutions. We are not going to get the best out of people in any work environment. If you're a manager, you will never get the best out of people if you're going to talk them down, you're going to call them names. What people do is they choose to quit quietly. That's the first thing. The second thing with public servants is that with the Public Service Commission over the years receiving support to improve its work, there has to be trust in the system, in that public servants, when they get suspended or when they have grievances and they complain about things, those grievances get taken seriously. Most public servants don't want to go out in the open because of how they get treated afterwards. And nobody spends a lot of time giving them the same backing as those that are attacking. So everybody takes a seat back. So there is a need to look into responsiveness of the system to those public servants. Then you'll change. Where they are motivated, they have the backing, they have the support. Personally, I've never had a problem. I pretty much gotten whatever I wanted. But there are pockets where people are not happy because the system is not responding. And the system of grievances, HR, labor relations, is one of the biggest problems in the public service at this point in time. And it's not getting the same attention. And yet the people that are expected to do this kind of work are public servants. So if we look into that, I think things make it a lot better.
I spoke yesterday to Lieutenant General Godfrey Libya, and
Yes.
he reckons now ending on where I said you wanted to take us, that he reckons they've done the best job that they could do under the circumstances, and they really made their mark. Do you agree, or does it tie in with what you wanted to say earlier about your view or assessment of that directorate?
This is what's going to happen. I agree with Advocate Libya. He's one of the finest we've had. They've done best with what they have. There are many things that will not come out, even at the inquiry. That I can say without fear of contradiction. There are stuff that will not come out. That is very, very serious. For the simple reason that people don't trust the process and they don't trust the system. You need to get the process to be trusted for people to truly tell you what they think. Because it matters what they think. They have the info, they have done the investigations, they see the stuff. So to avoid people choosing to not do anything and rather watch and let somebody else do it, they need to be able to trust the process. So the process must be trusted, they must be safeguarded, right? Issues of whistleblowers. People don't want to be whistleblowers because they don't trust processes. So Advocate Libya has his views with which I'm in agreement. We do have people that get prosecuted every year. We do have arrests every year. But there's equally a lot more that is not out there because people fear reprisals. And they do fear political commentary, that they're going to be commented upon in unfair ways. Nobody hears them talk. For example, I'm here, this is the first time I'm speaking in 15 years, isn't it? But I've got a lot more to say. But why did I choose to keep quiet? Because the way and the manner in which information is being dealt with, I don't think it's worthwhile for the system. I'm old school. I believe in the system of government. I believe information of government that we only got to access by virtue of being in government position must remain protected and have integrity. We don't speak about any way you want about that information because it's got people that are still in the system. It's got people that are accessible even if they are out of the system. So there are many things we have wanted to do and we can still do today or can be done today, but we can't talk about them because once the information is out, it gets misused politically, largely, it gets misused also operationally. And that's what we have to worry about going forward. If we prevent that, then things can change a little bit.
I've got 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, I've run out of time, actually.
Yeah.
What stuff, how serious, and why don't people like you, why don't you trust the process?
I don't trust the process because I've seen what happens to people who've spoken recklessly. In other words, recklessly.
Recklessly or truthfully?
Both. Truthfully and recklessly. There's consequences. The system does not protect those people. And I'm not going to be putting myself in a situation where you speak like that. That's 100%. It's not going to happen. But there's a way of dealing with it, which is a much better way. Ordinarily, you see, if you have problems in the NPA, crime intelligence, most of the people that are there are still alive. Why have they not been debriefed? Because that's what you do in a system that works. You debrief everybody that was there.
Why do you think that is?
Precisely, because the problem is driven too much by political contestation. And when it's driven by political contestation, it loses the substance of what it is about, which moves it from a professional day-to-day job to being a political theater. And many public servants are really not interested in politics. So you mean it's not done with the intention of solving or getting to the bottom of the issues that are confronting us, but rather political game? Absolutely. And many professionals don't want to be involved in that. Or those that are willing to share, they don't want to share that which then gets misused because it is them that are on the receiving side, including Ms. Brendenbach herself, who we've protected over many years.
Advocate Simelane, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your thanks to your viewers.
For my NPA heard, Advocate Menzi Simelane.